Welcome to Tim and Julie Harris Superstar Interviews. Today, we're joined by Celeste Starchild, the General Manager of ListHub, to discuss listing syndication in real estate today. ListHub provides the platform that supports MLSs, franchises, brokers, and agents with a complete set of tools to drive a successful strategy for advertising real estate listings. Celeste joins us to talk about the state of real estate listing syndication in today's market and to explain the role that ListHub plays in helping agents and brokers market their listings through syndication channels. Now to your host, Tim Harris.
Celeste, welcome to today's show.
Thank you, Tim. Hello, and thank you for having me here.
I really appreciate you setting aside time to share with all of our listeners what ListHub does, because whether the agents listening now live and in replay know it or not, they're probably doing business with ListHub. They just really don't understand necessarily how and what and all those good things about what you guys do. And I really want to drill down on what you guys do and how an agent can increase their engagement with you guys, and really just kind of maybe a general understanding of what ListHub's perspective is on the overall industry right now, especially with all this consternation that's happening amongst the portals. There's certainly a lot of topics.
What consternation?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean?
You know the funny thing?
No, I think that's really great, Tim. And I think they're as simple as it sounds. We think about syndication or sending our listings to websites for advertising. Gosh, it sounds so simple. And when you really start to peel back the layers, it really is fairly complex. And I've certainly learned that over the years here. So I think it's great to share perspective with folks from all over the place who it impacts everybody. So it's an important topic.
Well, Celeste, the reason that we sought you out to be on the radio show is because what a lot of agents don't get is that ListHub truly is the heart of syndication. You guys are really the central station of essentially all these conversations that are happening, and I think a lot of agents are really confused how it works. So I know this is impossible to do, but could you explain to the listeners really what ListHub does and all? You guys have, you have the realtor listing agent customer, you have the MLS customer, you have all these different, like you said, it's very complicated. Is there any way you can, in 5 seconds or less, can you explain us what you guys do? I'm kidding.
Sure. Well, actually, I will try to do that. We really are a network, and so that means we have different constituency groups that we serve simultaneously. We work with agents, we work with brokers, we work with the MLSs across the country, and obviously we work with the publishers or the websites like the Zillows and Trulias and Homes.com of the world. And our role is really to help to I'll say broker the relationship between the owners of the content, being the brokers and agents and MLSs, and those participants that receive the content, and make sure that there's an ongoing exchange of value between the parties that's equitable to everybody.
That's interesting you said that. Can you drill down on what you mean by ongoing exchange of value? That's very fascinating that you said it like that.
Sure. Well, I think it's easiest to tell it as a story because really as we journeyed through, our launch of our business and the growth of our business over the past, 7 or 8 years now, it really has changed a lot. So when we first started, there were just a couple of publisher websites we worked with. Some of you may remember Google Base. That was one of the big ones back then. Zillow and Trulia were early participants in 2006, back when they were just a very, very lightly trafficked websites and nobody had ever heard of them before. At the time, and many listeners might remember, you would put your listings on these websites and it was free leads. You're listing your lead, and everybody thought, well, this is just the greatest thing in the world. And at the time, of course, this was a period when we were experiencing an economic downturn, and the housing market was really suffering, and brokers and agents were finding it very difficult to afford the expense of print advertising. And so it came at a time that was really fortuitous, in a sense, for brokers and agents to find an alternate way to advertise listings at a lower cost and at no cost at the time. Now, over time, of course, things started to change, and we started to see things like instead of you're listing your lead, as it had been from the beginning, many of the publisher websites started coming up with new advertising models. And some of these models started to raise the question to brokers and agents about what are they really getting out of this syndication business, because they're started to see competing agents and brokers appearing on their listing pages on these websites. Some of the publishers, started to use the content in ways that had nothing to do with advertising to consumers, but instead things like bundling that data up and selling it off to banks. To use a more sort of egregious example. So what has happened is, here at ListHub, we had to take a step back and say, well, we made the decision that we're going to make it our role to really step in the middle of that conversation and change the way we work with publishers to include contracts with these publishers that really create boundaries and around what that listing content can be used for, how it needs to be displayed, etc. So that's become a really critical part of what we do. When I started in this business, I'm not sure I realized I was going to be involved with this type of sort of, data licensing and compliance as we are today. And that continues to evolve and increase. I think what we're finding is, it's constantly changing, and we're constantly looking, fielding inquiries and requests from MLSs and brokers who want more. And so we see it as our role to use our collective leverage because we are the biggest provider of content to most or all of these websites to be able to affect those types of changes.
Well, in essence, if those websites weren't getting the information from you, as Zillow is doing right now, they have to go directly to the brokers and try to get the information from them. So, those are their two choices. They can either have a relationship with you guys, or they can go out and forge their own independent relationships. And, so obviously working with ListHub is much more, I would assume for the most part, it's much more efficient. So ListHub is part of the Move.com organization. And, of course, listeners, well, hopefully you guys know that Move.com manages Realtor.com on behalf of National Association of Realtors. So how does ListHub fit into the much larger Move.com organization?
Well, it's been a journey. Again, we were acquired by Move 4 years ago this September, and there is still a lot of division in the way that we work together. We're very independent at ListHub, and it's really by necessity. We play a very different role in the industry than, say, Realtor.com does. ListHub is the keeper of a lot of analytics, clickstream traffic data, and really private information that websites like Trulia and Homes and Zillow have entrusted us with. And that's the information that we collected on behalf of brokers, and we share it with the brokers and the agents, but we don't share it with Realtor.com. So there's really a great wall of China in between Realtor.com and ListHub in many ways. Now, from an operational perspective, there are certainly ways that being part of Move has been advantageous, and there are some terrific resources. For example, wonderful designers that help us with our brochures and things like that that have been really, really great. I would say that the common thread between all Move businesses, so Realtor.com, ListHub, Top Producer, and others, that I think sort of gives us a unified culture is the fact that we are highly committed to organized real estate. We know who our customer is, and it's the realtor. I think some of the other, businesses, technology services, and certainly publishers may be aligned with different segments. I would say a lot of the publishers or portals that we work with probably consider the consumer to be their primary customer. We do not.
Right. Interesting. And so, the other thing, you guys aren't like Zillow and Trulia and even Realtor.com. They're essentially seen as an advertising website, right? So they advertise on behalf of agents and then sell the leads back. You guys are really, you could argue, you guys are further up the food chain. So you're the ones, so the information flows from obviously the seller to the listing agent to the broker to the MLS, then the MLS is it syndicates or sends the information directly to you guys, and if I'm doing this wrong, please correct me. And then you guys have these exclusive agreements with the AOL Real Estate, the Homes.com, the Home Finder, the Trulia, the Yahoo, the Zillows, and a ton of other sites. So they all then, for the most part, get the information from you guys. Am I saying that correctly?
You're saying it correctly. There's one nuance that I think is worth pointing out. A lot of people misunderstand that this is the MLS doesn't really make the decision about where the listings go and don't go. The ListHub platform is wholly controlled by brokers. So brokers call the shots when it comes to where their listings go.
You know what?
Now
That's a great point, and I think we need to drill down on that just ever so slightly, because
Sure.
agents believe that it's their MLSs that are deciding where the content goes, and you guys have designed your software so that basically, or you design your systems beyond software, so that the brokers are telling the MLS then telling you guys where the information is going to be syndicated. So if agents have a gripe where their information is showing up, they, for the most part, start with their brokerages. Did I hear you correctly?
That's correct, absolutely. The nuance there about 30% of the MLSs that we work with will set default settings for ListHub to say that all MLS listings should go to one site or another site, in some cases many sites. But ultimately it ends up being the broker's decision by virtue of just registration. It basically undoes any of the default settings that the MLS has put into place, and the broker has full control. So there's no situation where an MLS forces one decision or another on their brokers with respect to the ListHub settings.
I'm sort of curious. So you have analytics, and obviously we're not going to talk anything specific because you guys have agreements not to, but you have analytics essentially in all the different portals that you guys do business with. So
we do.
So if I were a real estate agent or a broker and I'm trying to understand who I should choose to syndicate my information to, would there be a place I could go to understand really, should I be syndicating to all of them? Or should I be syndicating to the ones that are going to get me the best bang for the buck, the most return on, not really an investment, but is there any scoring system for the realtor or for the broker to know what actually will get them leads versus what won't?
Absolutely. So the reports will absolutely do that. In effect, you can generate a table that shows you a list of all the publisher websites that you're subscribed to and who's giving you the most page views and leads generated, and that's very easy to see in the system. A lot of our broker customers use other tools to pick the sites. So, for example, based on business practices, within the ListHub dashboard, you can see filters that will allow you to filter through the list to identify publisher websites that do or don't do certain things. As an example, no FSBOs is one of the filters. So if I'm a broker and I do not want to support any publisher website that will advertise for sale by owner listings beside my listings, I can click that filter, identify those sites, and not select them. So there are a number of different tools out there, and within the dashboard, we have what's called a channel scorecard that is it's like the encyclopedia of what these publishers do and what features they have and what business practices they have. And so beyond just traffic, there are a lot of ways that brokers can make those decisions with more transparency.
I'm thinking from an agent's perspective. If I were an agent listening to this and I heard what she just said, I'm thinking that I'm going to go on a listing presentation tonight. I'm going to meet with a seller. And then when the whole conversation comes up about where you can be exposing my house online and whatnot, I would have a copy of what she just said with me so I can not only show the seller that I'm going to be putting your listing on all these different websites, but I then will be able to prove to the seller that I've actually researched which websites will get me or them the most exposure. And in other words, I'm not just saying like every other agent, I'm not just saying, well, I'm going to put it on all these different websites. I'm going to say, these are the sites that we're going to be exposing your house on, and this is why. So, guys, agents listening, think about how you can use this for, marketing yourselves. Interesting question. And does more exposure? This is a controversial question. I'm warning you, Celeste.
I'm ready.
By the way, you can do a call a friend on this one if you want to, or you can say pass. But does more exposure increase the sale price for the seller? In other words, that's kind of a controversial topic, right?
Sure.
So is there any inherent advantage, not for the agent who's trying to create the lead, let's just think about who our actual customer is, the seller. does more exposure actually truly benefit that seller?
This is very easy for me to answer, believe it or not, because we only deal in active data. We don't deal in sold data. So we don't have visibility into what the actual sale price is. So what I would say along those lines is, I think certainly more exposure, more eyeballs is obviously going to increase the chance of bringing more qualified buyers to the table. I think that math is kind of a no-brainer. I think when you look at the analytics, and I do this every day, I'm often surprised by where the traffic is coming from. There are sites for everyone, and there are sites like Condo Compare that aren't going to do anything for a piece of land in rural southwestern Virginia, but certainly for a condominium in Washington, D.C., absolutely applicable. We see that websites like LandWatch and FreedomSoft, and there are a number of sites out there that really appeal to a niche buyer. And just like there's a realtor for everyone, I mean, we have, I would say probably it's the same realtor who's really skilled at working with luxury properties and clients that look for luxury properties probably doesn't have the same skill sets when it comes to dealing in REOs, for example, right?
You know what? I'm sorry. There's a little delay on Blog Talk Radio. There's nothing I can do about it, so I apologize, listeners, if it sounds like I'm being rude to Celeste. I'm not intending to be. Well, but you're touching on something. This is interesting too. So I'm thinking again. I'm putting my listing agent hat on again, and I'm thinking if I'm going to go out and I'm going to sell or try to convince the seller to list with me, and you just said it. Let's say, for example, they have a house. There's new neighborhoods, guys, in case you didn't know about it, that are formed around people's hobbies, right? There's always been the houses with the dock behind that someone can park the boat, but now there's houses that are being built near people that want to have a plane, and there's houses that are built where there's a small airport, so people can literally, land their plane and park their plane, in essence, in a little small private hangar behind their house. There's houses and condos now that are being built, obviously, on ponds, those traditional things. And then I know there's another group of niched real estate that's starting to happen around, like in Austin, Texas, where Julie and I live. There's communities that are being built specifically for those people who are real enthusiasts of all the festivals that happen here when it's not scorching hot like it is today. So what you're saying is now that there's different the portals that provide that type of information. Like if I'm a car collector, so if I know that there's a couple websites out there where you can go and you can search for all the homes that are for sale, hypothetically, around the country that have on-site storage, so storage for, say, 10 cars. And so if you are going to present to a seller tonight and you have a specialty product, the house itself is going to be something that's going to appeal to a niche, and you present to that seller saying, listen, I appreciate the specific niche that your house might appeal to, and that's the reason I'm going to market it on this specific portal, in addition to maybe the others or maybe excluding the others, because I'm going to target your specific customer. That's kind of an interesting way for you guys to really drill down on the power of syndication, and I hadn't thought of that. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's true. And, speaking of REO, there are a lot of nuanced things that we do for specific partners and types of properties. And one of those examples is working with Fannie Mae. We are a sort of an exclusive partner for Fannie Mae in that we help get all the Fannie Mae-owned listings that exist across all the MLSs in the United States and synchronize those listings up to Fannie Mae's website, which is homepaths.com. So Fannie Mae has this pretty elaborate system for tracking their properties. It's obviously their biggest asset is these homes out there that are being listed with agents and across the country, and they want their listings up on their HomePath website. They also have offer management systems built into their platform and integrated with homepath.com. So in the absence of a ListHub to synchronize that, the agent's responsible for going to yet another place to hand enter the listing information is something none of us have time to do. And so there are a lot of nuances around some of these specialty types of properties and markets that are that make it a little less simple than just a feed to Zillow, Trulia, and Homes. And one of the really interesting opportunities that's growing that we've been watching and getting involved in is international. So international buyers and sellers, or buyers, I should say, that market is really increasing. In fact, from 2013 to 2014, according to the National Association of Realtors, it's increased by 30% in 1 year.
Wow.
So 1 in 6 properties in the United States are being purchased by an international buyer. It's really something to watch, and especially in markets. I think most markets, you know who you are out there, right? If you're in Florida, Texas, Nevada, Arizona, and California, this is something you absolutely cannot afford to ignore. And so we've started to engage with international networks as of last year, and we have some options available for brokers to do international marketing now.
So we've been talking fairly intensely on this radio show for the past few days about the Zillow-Trulia merger, and again, you guys are kind of right at the heart of this, and a lot of agents don't realize that. What effect, if any, do you think that will have on ListHub?
Well, on the surface, it's sort of one less website we would send to, although they say that they're going to be operating 2 separate brands. So, there may be some technical differences in how we work with the combined company compared with today. But again, I think overall this doesn't really impact what we do substantially. I think as we've been talking a lot about, niche websites and niche types of properties, and from an analytics perspective, we're not just measuring publisher websites, but we measure brokerage websites, agent website traffic, MLS public website traffic, franchise website traffic, and our goal is really to create a complete system for brokers and agents to be able to manage online marketing. So it's not just about sending a feed just to a Zillow or to a Trulia, but being able to do things like manage where leads are routed across all internet marketing, or measure consumer eyeballs and leads across all internet marketing. So it's quite a bit broader than that. Maybe it simplifies our life a little bit.
Yeah, right? From one less company to have to, I appreciate that. So this is an interesting question, but why would ListHub choose not to syndicate? So if someone wants to start a website and starts getting feed from ListHub, why would you guys choose not? Or, do you see a time, like there's a big stink where the CEO of Move was asked, can you see a time when you guys would no longer have ListHub syndicate to Zillow and Trulia? And he said, no way, that'll just never happen. That conversation is a very controversial one that comes up, and maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe it's something that's the agents don't really understand how it actually works. What I'm hearing from you is ListHub is, yes, a syndicator. I say the heart of all the syndication, but really you guys seem to have an incredible amount of data that agents and brokers could really be leveraging to better their position in their marketplaces. But have you ever had, or do you ever see a time when ListHub would just choose not to syndicate anymore to a specific portal without dropping names? And why would that happen?
Well, let's start with our vetting process. We are approached by dozens of companies on a weekly basis that ask us, can we be a publisher? Can we get the data? We're looking for listing content. Can you provide it to us? How much does it cost? And 9 times out of 10, we turn them away because they don't bring value to our brokers and agents. It's that simple. As I mentioned before, we have some pretty strict rules for publishers and what they can and can't do. So a lot of those companies come to us because they want to build an AVM and they just need data to power that, or they come to us for other reasons. And that's not why we exist. So we turn away more people than we support. So I'd say, like I said, about 1 in 10 people or companies rather who come to us are really eligible and really have a website. Now, some people have asked us, well, why support a website that doesn't have any traffic? And I would say that, we like to see innovation, and we don't think it's our role to block someone out because they're not big enough. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that, Zillow and Trulia didn't have any traffic. And it's always fun to see the new ones, right? It's fun to see the ones that are newcomers to the game that, that build their traffic and do a good job. HotPads is a great example of that. They were nobody, and within a couple of years, they were usually about number 6 on most people's ListHub reports. A new one that I've seen lately that's pretty exciting is findthebest.com. They're already generating a lot of traffic in a very short amount of time. So I don't think it's our role to filter people out that don't have traffic, but the ones that don't have the right business model, we do shut the door early on. And as far as, the bigger picture, should ListHub, to your point about the interview with Steve Berkowitz and when he was asked, why not just turn ListHub off? Now, I think that we really believe as a company that the industry needs a centralized single pipe to be able to leverage the opportunities that are out there. In fact, the whole reason why I joined ListHub to begin with is because I started my career at a software company. We were trying to serve brokers and realtors, and we realized they didn't have their own data. And in many cases, they didn't have access to it or didn't know how to get it to us. And, gosh, they wanted to use my software because it really would make their lives easier, but they didn't have the pipe to support that. And I really couldn't believe that. And I knew that in order for the industry to be empowered in a digital world, the industry needed to have better systems for managing data. I think the same is true for analytics. You think about not just listing data going out to different places, but when you think about analytics coming in, it's important, again, to have a single platform and a single pipe. We think about the kind of number crunching and big data exercises that big retailers use. You can read online about things like, what Target does to, understand their customers and target their customers, no pun intended. Or Netflix or big companies like that have really well-publicized case studies that you can read about. Real estate is so fragmented in most cases, made up of many, many, many small companies because it's a local industry, right? That's how it's been for many years and how it should probably continue to be. So how do we as an industry leverage the analytics that are available out there? We need a central platform to bring it all together, make it into something meaningful, crunch it and slice it and dice it and provide it in a way that makes sense to our businesses. You need to be able to know as a broker or an agent not just how many clicks you got on your listings, but how did that compare to your market area or your zip code? So it's not just about traffic on your listings, but traffic across an entire market or state or, country. So there's a lot of opportunity in the single platform, and that's what we really believe in and really why we exist.
Well, you guys do have a tremendously powerful position because you guys really do, through Move.com. Move.com, you guys can pick who's going to get the information and who's not going to get the information. And in a lot of cases, like I'm thinking of any of the major portals, you guys can, listeners, you can figure out who I'm talking about. If you were to decide, if ListHub were to decide one day, for whatever reason, that we're no longer going to syndicate data to, ABC website, they are pretty much going to go out of business because the reason that they get consumers to go to their website is to look at the listings, and the reason that their revenue model is based on selling the leads that come from those listings back to agents. And if that were to get shut off, that is kind of, I guess, the ultimate nuclear option that I suppose could trickle down, but it doesn't seem like that's even going to happen because ListHub has kind of positioned itself as a gatekeeper of the information, but it flows both ways. I think that's kind of fascinating. I hadn't considered that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it does flow both ways. I think, though, too, we've been asked, by people who might not like one website or another. I really don't like the way they operate. Why don't you just turn them off? And our perspective on that is really, there are a couple ways to look at it. I think the most important thing to realize is that without a ListHub, a lot of these companies will still get the data, but they'll get it through ways that are not protected. They don't protect the brokerage. They get it through ways that are not accurate. So, for example, there are a lot of virtual tour companies, website vendors, other software providers out there that will gladly send a listing feed to various places around the internet, and do. Doesn't mean that they're good at it. Doesn't mean that they're doing a good job keeping it accurate. It doesn't mean they have specialized contracts in place to make sure that hey, when that listing comes off market, that the listing needs to come down, and by the way, the photos have to be removed as well. Those are the types of things that we do and we specialize in, whereas a virtual tour company is not going to have that kind of contract with a Zillow or a Homes.com or whoever. So we think the data would still go. It just would be it would be low quality and would give the portals the right to do whatever they want with that content.
Because they wouldn't be following your guys' rules that you set in place, and your rules were
Correct.
set out to best represent the individual practitioner, and I appreciate that. And that's kind of the essence of what you're saying. And by the way, I hadn't considered that is an interesting counterpoint that probably needs to be put out there, what you just said. So even if you guys were to cut off the information to say, for example, Trulia and Zillow or Zulia, whatever it's going to be called, they would then A, obviously continue to try to forge relationships directly with brokers, and B, they would get their data from the companies that realtors are doing virtual tours with, or home brochures, or whatever else, and that data is not going to obviously be as accurate. Whether that ultimately would hurt realtors or not, I think, is a different conversation, because if someone's looking for a house online and they're going to one website and the information is not very good, but then they can go to, say, for example, Realtor.com and all the information is really good, the eyeballs will follow ultimately where the information is. But I guess maybe that's not for us to discuss.
I don't know. I think what I would hope is that our customers understand what we're doing in that regard, because I actually think that although it's probably convenient for some of the bigger publishers to get a feed from ListHub instead of going at it site by site or broker by broker or MLS by MLS, I actually think they would prefer to have unlimited, unfettered rights to keep the content and do it directly.
I think you're right. That totally makes sense. It'd be like the wild, wild west. I definitely see your point. So our audience is mostly individual practitioners, the boots on the street, the individual listing agents. How do they engage with ListHub beyond how they're doing it right now through their MLSs? If a realtor wanted to really get access to all the information that you guys have, to use it in their own business, to hone in on what's working for them and what's not, and then obviously use that to present to the seller to show that they are really taking in consideration all the different moving parts on online lead generation. How does an individual practitioner engage with you guys?
Sure. So there are a couple things. If for individual agents, if your broker or your MLS is using ListHub for syndication, there are some free things and some not so free things that I could point out. So one of which is make sure your lead management is set up to go where you want it to go. A lot of agents miss out on opportunities because the leads aren't going where they most often check email. Even better if you have a lead management program like 5 Street or Boomtown or something like that, where you can get leads routed according to special rules. If you're advertising online, these consumers want really quick follow-up. So just make sure if you can't get to it that someone else can. Maybe you can refer that or whatever the case might be. Those opportunities get lost pretty fast. The other thing I would say is if you operate your own agent website, there are options to get traffic redirected there. So those links on, Trulia and Home Finder, those links to the source of the listing, you can set those up to go back to the listing detail page on your own website and drive traffic to your site. So that's really cool. If you've invested a lot in your website, you might want to think about that. The analytics and all the syndication we do is free. The reports are what we sell. So for an individual realtor, it's really nominal fee. It's $129 a year to get access to the reports. So it's not really that much, and that's for unlimited listings. And you can set up seller reports, so your clients get automated updates every week or whatever frequency you want to show them what you have done for them lately, should we say?
Right.
You can also add your own agent website traffic metrics onto those reports. It's a great little brand pick-me-up to show off all the hard work you've done to promote your own website. So I'd say those are the top things that I would look at as an agent, and don't forget to use it in listing presentations, Tim. I think you did a good job of saying that right off the very bat. If you don't have a good story going into a listing presentation, everybody puts their listings online these days. Everybody does. So there are ways to differentiate and talk about, hey, I've targeted specific websites that are really powerful to put your listings on. Or not only am I going to put your listings on a zillion websites, I'm also going to show you the results of that and give you access to my professional tools that I use as a realtor to look at my marketing results. So you'll be able to see what kind of interest your house is getting. Those types of things will really differentiate you from other people.
A lot of agents have been spoiled because I'm thinking California, Florida, a lot of these other markets where they've never really had to deal with long days in the market. But as the market starts to shift and we start seeing it more, go into an equilibrium phase and away from this hot seller's market, agents, listen, you're going to have to be able to do what Celeste just said, and you're going to have to start being able to provide information to the seller to answer their question about what have you done for them lately. And those reports that you just mentioned, those are awesome. I mean, you can then have the system automatically email the seller this very not all the sellers are going to care, I get it, but at least they're getting something from you that shows the activity you're doing. So one last question, Celeste, and it's a simple one if you don't mind.
Sure, of course.
So what on the horizon, a year from now, will our industry be talking about? Right now it's the Zillow Trillia thing, right? So a year from now, what do you think is out there that might be like a black swan or something that's going to really surprise folks? Anything you're seeing, anything you're maybe a new industry or new niche, anything emerging that's worth talking about?
Well, one thing I'll share with you that this is something that Move overall, not ListHub specifically, but Move overall is working really hard on that I think is super cool and something I don't know that everybody really thinks about. But think about all these publisher websites, right? And consumers are going to different websites and they're filling out lead forms and they're asking for more photos or they're asking about features of the property, et cetera, right? And a lot of these leads are being sold to realtors. We know that. And how often is the same person, just say me, Celeste Starchild, I go look at properties, maybe I go to homes.com, and then I go poke around over on Zillow, and then I go poke around at the MLS public website, or, I might be going to multiple websites. And by the way, most consumers do use multiple websites. So how many times am I filling out a lead form? And across how many websites? What we really need as an industry is what I would refer to as like a leads clearinghouse, so that when you get a lead from one of these websites, it comes with, it's not just an email address and a message. It comes with search history, where they're looking, how frequently they're looking for property, what types of things they're looking for, on which websites, just getting that intel behind that lead and a score really is lead scoring. I think that's really exciting, and I think as we all as individual agents have to think about, am I going to pay for a Trulia Pro or a Showcase product or all these various programs I can buy to be able to understand the value of these leads we get, not just the quantity of them, but really, has this lead been sold, 10 other times to 10 other agents?
You know what, Celeste, that is something that we talk about all the time with our students, and we talk about it on this radio show, and you're absolutely right. I think that's going to be the topic of conversation. All these, we hear from all of our students that they buy a lead from, of course, to be honest with you, most of our students are moving away from buying leads at all because they're learning how to self-generate. But these guys that do buy leads, they'll say, I get the same lead from this company, this company, and this company. And, by the way, that same lead is going to 10 other realtors too. So in the past 7 years, we've seen essentially an oversaturation of the leads that are being sold. The lead quality has gone down. And there was a great report. I don't have it on my desktop right now. There's an awesome report, I think it was done by Realogy, that talked about essentially where they personally get, where that company gets their leads from. And if I remember correctly, the third-party websites, the Zillies, the Trillias, the Realtor.coms, the ones that aren't theirs, it was like less than 10%, I think, if I remember correctly, of all their leads came from one of those portals. The rest were the ones they were directing. And then there was another report that came out that said of the three major portals, Zillow, Trillia, Realtor.com, and this is something I didn't know until I was researching in preparation for our call today, the lead quality, according to most major brokers, that comes from Realtor.com is actually better than the lead quality that comes from the other two. So I think all this stuff, you're right, so fascinating. And if there was a way that people could just sort of look at this and have this whole thing be transparent, that would definitely move the conversation to a wholly different level. And I also think it would do the guys out there that are really doing a great job for our industry, it would, put the wind at their wings so they could essentially get the respect and, the realtor dollars that they deserve to build their businesses to the next level, and there's less noise, almost a way of
I agree with you. When I see some of I agree. When I see some of the traffic figures that come off of like ComScore or Hitwise,
right.
I just shake my head. I mean, they're accurate, it's true and all that, but what does that mean in terms of value for
totally.
an individual?
I think that too.
Whole different
so what if you had 80 million unique visitors last week, or last month, or whatever it was? There's 5 million homes sold per year. So that tells me that you have a ton of people that are going to your website that are just wasting time.
You got it.
They're going to go to TMZ and read about Brad and Angelina, on their next, who knows, Anyway, so listen, Celeste, I really appreciate your time today. I learned a ton about ListHub that I didn't know. Please help me to get Mr. Berkowitz on our radio show because I'd love to interview him too. Listeners, do reach out to ListHub. I hopefully from just listening to us for the past few minutes, you've been able to learn a lot about what ListHub can do for you. I appreciate the fact that they have they're essentially protecting the individual practitioner, and that's something that all of us need to appreciate and embrace. So, listeners, thank you for attending today, and Celeste Starchild, thank you for being my co-host. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thanks you all for listening. I really, really have enjoyed it. I appreciate being here.
Have a great day, everyone.